The market on Bitcoin tried to get over it, and it couldn't. It stalled out. We fell. We now bounced. Now we're kind of falling again. So for me, that was a line where I would say if we got above and stayed above, the low of 15.7 is probably the low.
In today's video, Chief Market Strategist of InTheMoneyStocks.com Gareth Soloway tells us all about his latest analysis of the charts as well as his predictions and price targets for Bitcoin. He believes that we could possibly see Bitcoin's low in the coming months. Soloway shares his opinion regarding high inflation rates, the stock market, the crypto market, and the Fed.
What are your thoughts about the direction the Federal Reserve is going to be taking tomorrow during the FOMC meeting?
Yeah, so at least per the odds, it's a 25 basis point rate hike. So investors should be ready for that. Now, having said that, the market has virtually priced that in. So that's what the market's expecting. The big question tomorrow is going to be, where do they guide? Now, if you look at some of these bank stocks, I mean, we had FRC getting bought out, or essentially being seized, and then their assets were bought out by JP Morgan. A lot of people thought that was the end of it, right? Okay, get that bank. It was already in trouble, out of the way. And then today we come in and we see PacWest dropping 25% again today. The regional banks, like even big regional banks like US Bank, USB is hitting new 52-week lows. So, my big thing here is that Jerome Powell, by hiking rates as aggressively as he did, he basically has caused this breakage in the system, right? In these regional banks. The big banks are having issues too, but they're big enough to withstand it right now. The regionals aren't, and that's why you're seeing these type of dumps.
As far as the charts go, do you mind pulling up the DXY?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because obviously, I think this is kind of setting the direction of a lot of things moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the key, right? So there's no doubt we topped out on the dollar last October. If you look at when Bitcoin bottomed, when equity markets bottomed, there's that correlation, right? When the dollar topped out, most risk assets bottomed. That makes sense. Gold bottomed as well. We've seen gold really rip to the upside. What we're seeing now is this breakage of this trend line, this upsloping trend line that goes all the way back to kind of the 2021 period, and we did break below it. And then look at how we broke below it. Then we retested the line, pulled back, and look at today's high again, retesting that line. So you are seeing stabilization in the dollar here. But to me, this is actually a bearish pattern formation. I actually do expect further downside on the dollar. I think it coincides with realization that eventually we are headed into a recession, right? So the markets are ignoring that. I mean, I've gone off on tangents in regard to this, that again, the markets and investors are back to the times of 2021. I mean, look at Pepe, look at Gensler, look at what Nvidia's done recently, Microsoft. I mean, money is flowing freely into the market, but there are, to me, warning signs, including that the Fed said there's going to be a mild recession later this year.
What are your thoughts on where Bitcoin's at and where it's headed in the short term?
Yeah, so with the bearish comments, that's more related to the equity markets. I continue to be net bearish on Bitcoin as long as it hasn't gotten through that 30,000 level. But one of the things, and I love showing this chart setup here, I want to show you guys this to see if we can take a look here. So if we look at this chart, this is the monthly chart of the S&P 500, and we see this long bullish move, right? Just continual move up, then this bigger pullback, and then this kind of little bit of upside consolidation. What I want to do here is I want to bring up a chart with you guys called the psychology of the market chart. So again, you have the cycle of optimism to belief to thrill to euphoria, then the drop, then this is where people are starting to believe that the bullishness will come back before the cliff dive to the downside. And again, just going back here real quick, look at how this correlates. Look at the up move, look at the pullback, and look at that sideways chop. So to me, the next move on this chart is going to be the nastiest on the S&P 500. It's probably going to take us down sharply, 3,000 on the S&P, a no-brainer to me, maybe even lower. But again, I would be prepared for the equity markets at least to have a big fall.
What was the percentage on that you just had, though?
The drop?
Yeah, from that high point to the low point.
For me, this would be a worst case scenario. This would be like the all out depression retrace. But this is the 2000 high, and this is the 2007 high, right? And one of the things and the reason why I have this trend line in, and I don't want to make people freak out too much because I'm not necessarily calling for this in the near term, but in a worst case scenario, generally when markets break out, and we could see the breakout occurring right here, and it just continues up, Usually when you break out of a level, you retrace to that level before going higher. This never retraced because the Federal Reserve was jacking drugs into the system, i.e. quantitative easing, so it never got the chance to fully retrace. So what this tells me is that if you really get the Fed to be sidelined, you could actually head back to that level, which would be an over 50% decline from current levels. And again, that's the worst case scenario, but I think it is a possibility before all is said and done within the next few years.
What are the charts telling you of like when we could see kind of reality kind of setting back into the markets?
I would say later this decade, right? So the way I'm thinking about it is that we are seeing inflation come down. It's going to remain elevated above 3% or around 3% for a long period of time, which is going to handcuff the Fed. However, if things get bad enough, even at 3% inflation, the Fed will absolutely come to the rescue. They'll lower rates. They'll start printing money again. I mean, just imagine if we had 20% unemployment. You can't tell me at 3% inflation, they're not stimulating to get us out of 20% unemployment. So there will be a ticking point. The problem is going to be is that if you stimulate when we're at 3 or 3.5% inflation, where's the next high? 12, 15, 20% inflation. Essentially, this is the beginning of the blow up of the system. Right. So there's only so much that they can do without sending inflation to crazy levels. And eventually later this decade, you do get that depression-ish type situation, that flush out.
So you think several years out, though, nothing like in the near term, even midterm? Yeah. Okay.
No, I do think, and mainly it's a little bit further out. So we're still going to see a recession later this year, but my guess is it'll start out to be mild. It'll get a little worse. It'll get to a point where the Fed actually starts to cut rates, and that hopium from investors will get money in. It'll prop up the markets a little bit. It'll help. It'll make money cheaper to borrow. Banks will be willing to lend. So it's going there. There's stimulative measures that can be taken to just push off that ultimate kind of collapse for a few more years. But again, probably within that 100-year cycle of 1929. So again, later this decade, within a couple of years of that, that's what I would say to watch for.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, now as far as crypto is concerned, Bitcoin, like what are you thinking about Bitcoin as far as the just the next few months? I'm just really at a very confused state when it comes to the markets. Do you see us heading down? Do the charts tell you that 15.5 is the bottom that we're going to see in the Bitcoin price market?
So as of now, so the big level I've been watching is this 30,500 level. And this level goes all the way back. I'm going to get rid of this level here. So if you go back to the beginning of that mega run up in early 2021, then we had that collapse where we hammered on this level here. We then went up, and then we actually bear flagged before breaking down. So the 30,500 level to me is that line in the sand. The market on Bitcoin tried to get over it, and it couldn't. It stalled out. We fell. We now bounced. Now we're kind of falling again. So for me, that was a line where I would say if we got above and stayed above, the low of 15.7 is probably the low. We haven't done that yet. So I'm not convinced that Bitcoin has bottomed. And in fact, even though there's so much bullishness out there on crypto, I would just remind people that if you go back to 2018, 2019, there were bounces that were bigger than this bounce in Bitcoin, right? I mean, we had a $3,500 low on Bitcoin. We then went near 10,000 before retracing to 3,500. That's almost a 3x, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, it's a great bounce, but it's not abnormal for a bear market bounce cycle.